Today's topic is going to be the topic of personal identity. So, what is this topic? Well, basically, we can summarize our topic with one very simple question. What are we, really? I can now ask myself, what am I? Obviously, one answer is that I'm a person. But then we can ask, what kind of thing is a person? Is a person fundamentally identical to an immaterial soul that is only temporally associated with the body, but will survive even when the body no longer survives? Or is a person the same thing as a human biological organism, a sophisticated animal that is a member of the great apes? Or are we something else? This question is important for a number of reasons. One reason is because our bodies and our psychological attributes change over time. My body is now very different from the body that I had when I was 3 years old. Here's a picture of me when I was 3. Just look how different I am. Also, my personality and my beliefs and my memories and my skills are also very different from the psychological traits that I had when I was 3. And yet, most of us think that we remain the same person over time. I think that I am the same person as this 3-year-old. But what can explain this? What do I have in common with this 3-year-old? As it turns out, this topic has important consequences for both ethics and the law. That is because we hold people responsible for the past versions of themselves. We think that a person is culpable for the actions that they have done in the past, and that they are bound by the contracts that they have made in the past, and that they deserve what was owed to them from the past. But in order to make sense of any of this, we need some sort of explanation of what makes a person the same over time. Another significant reason why this topic may be important to you is because it has an obvious relevance to the question of whether it's possible to survive after death. For if what I am at the most fundamental level is just my body or a biological organism, then I will only live for as long as my body lives. But if instead I'm like an immaterial soul or a stream of consciousness, then it's possible for me to exist even after my body no longer exists. All right. So that now sets the stage for this dialogue by the philosopher John Perry called A Dialogue on Personal Identity and Immortality. I quite like this dialogue. I think it does a good job of setting up the philosophical debate in a way that makes you see why the issue matters. The whole dialogue is centered around this character named Gretchen Wyrob, and according to the story, she is a philosophy professor who has just been in a serious car accident, and she only has a few days to live. Wyrob is a skeptic. She does not believe in life after death. Rather, she believes that a person is only identical to their body, and so in her view, when her body dies, she will die with it. Now, in the story, two of her friends named Sam Miller and Dave Cohen come to visit her in the hospital. They try to comfort her by giving potential explanations as to how life after death could be possible, each of which relies on its own theory of personal identity. Throughout the dialogue, Wyrob remains skeptical, and she provides counter-arguments to their theories. And in the final moment of the dialogue, she passes away. Here, I'm going to focus on just two of the views on personal identity that come up throughout the dialogue. These will correspond to the views that the Friends advocates on night 1 and night 2. In the first night of the dialogue, the character Sam Miller advocates for a view that, according to which we are, fundamentally speaking, identical to immaterial souls. The idea here is that our material bodies, strictly speaking, are not really a part of us. Rather, There is a immaterial substance, a non-physical thing, that is the location of our thoughts and consciousness. This substance is called a mind or a soul. And according to this view, this thing is distinct from our bodies. It's possible for the soul to exist without the body, and it is possible for the body to exist without a soul. This view is sometimes called, in the philosophical literature, dualism, since it holds that there are two kinds of things. There are physical bodies and immaterial souls. Lastly, according to this view, what we are as persons are our souls. On this view, I am a soul. I am not a body. I have a body because my soul, that is me, is temporarily associated with a body, but this body is not an essential part of me. This body could die, and yet I would still exist, because as a soul, I can survive the death of my body. My body is just like a temporary vessel of mine. Given that the character Y-Rob is a skeptic, you would probably expect for her to doubt that souls exist. But in the story, that's not actually the counter-argument she makes. Instead, in this story, what she does, rather, is that she grants that souls could exist, and then she wants to challenge the idea that what a person is, what I am, is the same thing as a soul. Here's her argument in a nutshell. As you've been watching this video so far, you've been able to see my physical body, my physical being, speaking to you and making various gestures and various noises. You have not been able to observe my soul because that is an immaterial substance, and so it isn't something that you can just see. Now, imagine that the soul that was associated with this body just 1 minute ago was replaced with a different soul. And suppose that the new soul had very similar psychological characteristics, so that the new soul would seem to have all of the same personality traits, maybe even the same beliefs and same memories as the last soul did. And so my body's outward behavior would be indistinguishable. According to Y-Rob, you, my audience, would continue to think that I am the same person, that I'm the same person now as I was several minutes ago. But if who I am is a soul, then the person speaking to you right now would not be the same person who was speaking to you a few minutes ago. Why? Well, because I would be a soul, and that was a different soul that was associated with his body a few minutes ago. So it would be a different person. Y-Rob argues that, according to the soul view of personal identity, you would never really be able to know that this body that's speaking before you will be associated with the same person over time. Because these switches with souls would be possible, and you wouldn't be any wiser to it. People could change all the time in front of your face, and you would never know. But then, she also thinks that you can know that you have been watching the same person this whole time. So therefore, she argues, the personal identity cannot be a matter of sameness of soul. Let me just summarize this argument again. So if the soul view of personal identity were correct, then you would not be able to know that I have been the same person this whole video. But you are able to know that I'm the same person throughout this whole video. Therefore, the soul view of personal identity is not correct. It's also worth thinking about the matter from my own perspective. Right now, it seems to me that I have been talking to you for several minutes. And this body that is speaking to you now has also been speaking to you for several minutes. But what if the soul that I have now is not the same soul as the one that was associated with this body a few minutes ago? What if the soul that is here now was created only 1 minute ago, with very similar memories and a personality like the one that was here a few minutes ago? What if, so to speak, my soul's changed? Then, if what I am is a soul, then I would have only existed for a few minutes. I would think that I was the same person as was here a few minutes ago, but I would be wrong. According to Rob, if the soul view is correct, then I couldn't really know that I was the same person that was here talking to you a few minutes ago. For all I know, I just popped into existence 1 minute ago as a new, fresh soul. But according to Rob, this is a totally absurd thing to be possible. Of course, I can know that I was here talking to you a few minutes ago. But this again must mean that the soul view of personal identity is wrong. Whatever I am not a soul. Okay, so let's now move on to the second night of the dialogue. In this stage of the conversation, Rob's friends are no longer in support of the soul view of personal identity. Instead, they want to argue for a new view, which is called the psychological continuity theory of personal identity. This theory is famously advocated by the philosopher John Locke. In order to explain this idea, I'm going to use the same thought experiment that John Locke used to motivate the view. First, imagine that there's a prince who has always lived a life of royalty. And imagine also that there is a cobbler who has always lived their life making shoes. And so now here's the real crux of the thought experiment. Imagine that one day the two of them were to suddenly switch all of their psychological states, so that after the swap, the body that was the cobbler would have all of the memories and beliefs and personality traits that formerly belonged to the prince. And likewise, imagine that the body of the prince would suddenly have all of the memories, beliefs, and personality traits that formerly belonged to the cobbler. So that after the switch, the body of the prince would say, I used to be a cobbler. And the body of the cobbler would say, I used to be a prince. Okay, so I hope you understand the setup. Basically, there were two people with two bodies, and suddenly all the psychological states associated with each body got swapped into the other body. If you can imagine this, then Locke wants to ask you, after the switch, which person is which? Which person is the one that was formerly associated with the prince's body? Did they remain in the prince's body, or did they switch over to the cobbler's body? And likewise, which person is the one that was formerly associated with the cobbler's body? Did they remain with the cobbler's body, or did they switch over into the prince's body? Locke thinks that the answer to this question is that each person switched bodies. The prince now has the cobbler's body, and the cobbler now has the prince's body. Also, if he's right, then this would tell us something deep and substantial about personal identity. According to Locke, a person's identity is not determined by their body. Instead, it is determined by a certain sort of continuity of psychological states. In his view, the reason why the cobbler has switched into the prince's body is because the prince's body now has all of the psychological states that are a continuation of the cobbler's psychological states. It is because the prince's body inherited all the cobbler's memories and thoughts and feelings. That is why the prince's body is now the body of the cobbler. It is because the prince's body is the continuation of the cobbler's consciousness. So that's Locke's psychological continuity theory, put very briefly. Basically, it says that our personal identity over time is determined by the continuation of our consciousness, and that includes our memories. Now, I want you to notice that this view is not quite the same as the one that posits an immaterial soul that we're identical with. That is because, unlike the soul view, the psychological continuity theory never claims that there needs to be a common immaterial substance that first attached to the cobbler's body and then attached to the prince's body. On this view, Locke's view, you are not identical to any one substance or any one single thing. Instead, according to this view, you are more like a stream of different stages, and they're all united by having being related by their conscious states. There doesn't need to be a common substance that unites the various stages of a person. Rather, the various stages of a person just have to be a continuation of the same consciousness. Okay, so even though this view doesn't posit the existence of any immaterial souls, it's still possible, according to this theory, for a person to survive the death of their body. Why is that? Well, it's because if your body dies, it's still possible for there to be another body, perhaps a body that exists in heaven, that will have conscious states that are a continuation of your own. And then, according to this view, that person would then be you. You would switch into a new body. Nonetheless, going back to Perry's story, Weyerod the skeptic makes several objections against this view of personhood. I'm not going to have the time to mention all of them, but I can mention just one objection that she makes. Suppose now, for the sake of argument, that this body of mine were to die right now. And then, suppose that in heaven, God were to create not one, but two heavenly bodies, and put inside them, both of them, the conscious states that would be a continuation of the ones that I have right now. So both of them were to have all of my apparent memories and thoughts and personality traits and so on. Both of them are continuations of my consciousness. Surely this is something that God can do. But then, these two people in heaven, they would not be identical to each other, since there's two of them. So they can't be the same person. There's two. So then we can ask, which one of them would be me? Since they're not the same person, they can't both be me. So which one do I become? What this shows is that there is a problem for this view that personal identity is just a matter of psychological continuity. It seems to show that mere psychological continuity is not sufficient to explain personal identity. So that's all I'm going to say about that for now. There's a lot more details to these views and these arguments that's in Perry's paper, but this is only meant to be a brief overview. Okay, thanks for watching.